Hello, I am Peter Okwache. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. After Libyan warlord Khalifa Haftar walks out on peace talks in Moscow, Turkey warns it will teach him a lesson if he resumes attacks on the UN-backed government.
If he continues to attack the country's legitimate government and our brothers in Libya, we will never stop giving the co-attempter Haftar the lesson he deserves.
Where is Lesotho's First Lady? Police appeal for help to track her down for questioning over the murder of the Prime Minister's former wife. France and the G5 Sahel countries agree more military cooperation, but just how much of a difference will it make in the fight against the jihadist insurgency? Also on the program, fixing by feel. How this blind mechanic learned his trade.
I first visualize how the parts were built at the factory and see if they are still in the right positions. After I've done this, it works.
And in sports, the Ghana Football Association names coaches at all levels of the game after dissolving its technical committee earlier this month. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has threatened to teach Libyan warlord General Khalifa Haftar a lesson if he resumes fighting in the North African country. It comes as General Haftar abandoned ceasefire talks in Moscow on Tuesday without signing a peace deal aimed at ending 9 months of fighting. Here's what President Erdogan had to say.
The co-attempter Haftar refused to sign the ceasefire. First he said yes, but then he left Moscow. He escaped from Moscow and didn't sign. If he continues to attack the country's legitimate government and our brothers in Libya, we will never stop giving the co-attempter Haftar the lesson he deserves.
Well, the leader of Libya's UN-recognized government is in the capital, Tripoli. Fayez al-Sarraj, who also attended the talks in Moscow on Monday and signed the peace agreement, held a closed-door meeting with Mr. Erdogan in Istanbul today. Let's get more on this with BBC Arabic reporter Hanan Razek. Hanan, do we know what the two men discussed in Istanbul today?
We don't know in details, but we understand that he is trying to rally support for his camp. If we look at how it unraveled since Sunday, each camp was blaming the other for not upholding the ceasefire. On Monday, Moscow called for an urgent meeting. They were there for 7 hours negotiating. After 7 hours of negotiations, Khalifa Haftar, General Khalifa Haftar of the east side, went out and he said he's not signing the deal anymore. And we heard the words of Erdogan that you were mentioning earlier today.
And those are very strong words from President Erdogan. What exactly can he do?
Well, we know, Peter, that Turkey has already signed or passed a bill to deploy troops to Libya. They say it's mainly for training purposes. They also shipped and sent logistical military support. We also know from our sources in Tripoli that Turkey has sent Syrian fighters as well on the ground. What can he actually do right now? I think this comes in the context that he wants to send a message that he is as strong as the other camp.
Absolutely. And we also know that there is a meeting being planned for Berlin on Sunday to be attended by the European Union, the African Union, the French, the Brits. What's going to be discussed here? What can be achieved at this meeting that wasn't achieved in Moscow yesterday?
You know, looking at how fragile the ceasefire and truce has been and what happened in Moscow yesterday, hopes are not so high at the moment. But also, I think the international community is understanding how bad the situation is becoming now, giving all the militias on the ground, all the militant groups. I know people there who tell me that every other street has its own leader, kind of. So they know that the situation will be worsened if they cannot get them together and proceed for a political process.
And just for people on the ground in Libya, you know, I know we concentrate a lot on the capital, Tripoli, because that is where General Haftar is trying to get into. But what's life like? What are people telling you on the ground in Libya?
Different things. I mean, they try. What strikes me the most, actually, is how in places like Tripoli, people start to normalize their lives. They know that since yesterday, for example, after Khalifa Haftar stormed out or walked out of the talks, and he didn't sign the deal, immediately after skirmishes were renewing on the outskirts of the Tripoli, especially from the south. But we hear people there saying that they try to live with that and try to go by in their day-to-day life, because what else can they do?
Hanan, thank you very much for your insight into this story. Hanan Razek there from BBC Arabic. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. Over 30 people have died, while others are in critical condition following a head-on collision of two buses in central Ghana. 17 people are still unaccounted for. According to the police, one of the bus drivers was attempting to overtake a vehicle in front of him and in the process collided with an oncoming bus. More than 4,000 mass graves have been found in Burundi's main city, Bujumbura. It comes after an investigation by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission into conflicts since independence in 1962. Since that time, Burundi has experienced a series of ethnic conflicts between the Hutus and the Tutsi ethnic groups. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission also says it has identified the names of over 140,000 people killed since independence. There's been heavy exchange of gunfire in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, between the military and members of the National Intelligence Service, a powerful and much-feared unit when President Bashir was in power. The reason for the unrest appears to be a disagreement over severance pay. Its feared conflict between security forces is a major threat to the country's stability. And Kenya says it will impose a 16% value-added tax on all imported milk products that originate outside the East Africa community. The move is to protect local farmers who are facing a glut and low prices in the market. Analysts say even though the move may be well-intended, it could prove difficult to implement. Now, where is the First Lady of Lesotho? Police in the small southern African nation are appealing for help to find Messiah Tabane after she failed to appear for questioning over the murder 2 years ago of the Prime Minister's former wife, Dipolelo Tabane, who was shot dead in 2017, 2 days before the inauguration of Prime Minister Thomas Tabane. Well, Pascalina Kabi is an investigative journalist for the Lesotho Times and joins us now from Johannesburg. Pascalina, I mean, this is an extraordinary story. The First Lady of Lesotho is missing.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, she is. But the defense, in a case in which she is applying to have the court interdict the police from arresting her today, told the court that, according to the police investigations, she is suspected to have fled to face back in South Africa.
But what about the Prime Minister, Thomas Tabane? Does he know the whereabouts of his wife?
He hasn't really spoken to the issue, but one would think that he is supposed to know the whereabouts of his wife.
And Pascalina, could you just give us a quick overview of this issue? Why exactly is she being sought after?
The First Lady is being sought out by the police to assist with the investigations in relation to the assassination of the former wife of the Prime Minister, who was gunned down in June 2017, just 2 days before her husband was inaugurated as the Prime Minister. Now, late last year in December, the police wrote to the Prime Minister asking him that he assist with them with the information that places his mobile cell phone number shows that it was in communication with some of the people who were at the scene of crime. And then later on, the police wrote to the Prime Minister, in fact to the First Lady now, Maisaya Tabane, asking that she also shed more light on what happened on that day, given that her husband's mobile phone was used. But she hasn't reported to the police. She is on record telling a local investigative center that in the past, in 2017, she went to the police to give information when she was requested to. But this time around, she's fearing for her life, given the tension between her husband and the Commissioner of Police.
Pascalina, it's not a great line through to you, but we're going to try and persevere with it. What's been the reaction of people in Lesotho to this extraordinary story?
People are really shocked. People want justice for the late wife of the Prime Minister, and they are urging the police. They are, in fact, congratulating the police that finally there seems to be a breakthrough in the case. And there's an uproar that the Prime Minister and his government seems to be working hard to curtail the police investigations. And the opposition as well has also stepped in, asking the Prime Minister to step down, saying that the fact that his cell phone was used during the murder places him in a very compromising situation, and that he must step down.
Okay, Pascalina Kabi, the local journalist with the Lesotho Times, actually speaking to us from Johannesburg. Thank you very much. Now, the presidents of France and the G5 Sahel countries have agreed on more military cooperation to fight the jihadist insurgency in the region. But with a rising number of attacks and an increase in anti-French sentiment in the Sahel, just how much will it achieve? Let's take a look at the details of the deal. France will send an additional 220 troops to supplement the 4,500 already in the region. Those forces have been deployed under Operation Berkane in the Sahel since 2014, but until now, their command structure has been kept separate. Now they'll become part of a joint command structure across the region called the Coalition for the Sahel.
Today, more than ever, it is clear that the results we are achieving, despite our combined efforts, fall short of the expectations of our peoples who are experiencing major difficulties.
La priorité, c'est l'État islamique du Grand Sahara.
The priority is the Islamic State of the Greater Sahara, which doesn't prevent us from fighting other terrorist groups. But this is the main enemy because they are the most dangerous. We are now implementing a joint military coalition between our Operation Barkhane and the joint forces of the G5.
Let's now speak to Corinne Dufka. She's the West Sahel Director with the Human Rights Watch. Corinne, what's so different between the deal that was signed yesterday and what was in place before?
Well, I think it suggests more coordination, but I'm really quite concerned about what appears to be an overemphasis on a military solution to this issue, to the detriment really of two key dynamics and the lack of questioning of a very key question, which is why are so many young people joining the jihadist movements? I mean, over the last several years, Barkhane and the region's governments have claimed to have killed or neutralized hundreds of armed Islamists, and yet they keep launching these bold, audacious, and deadly attacks. So there's a dynamic there that really needs to be explored.
So what exactly can the leaders of the Sahel countries, the G5 countries, what more should they be doing then if you don't believe that a military solution is what they should be concentrating on?
is trying to strengthen and address the issues which gave rise to near state collapse in Mali in the first place, as well as the endemic corruption and other problems which are really driving this. But also, more importantly, both Mali and Burkina Faso have engaged in practices, the recruitment and use of militias in Mali, and then in Burkina Faso, very serious abuses, executions of suspects by the Burkina Faso military. And these two dynamics, according to my research, are driving hundreds of young men to join the Islamist groups. And until they get their heads around that and ensure that counterterrorism operations are anchored in respect for human rights, young men will continue to join the jihadist groups to avenge the killing of their family members.
And we also know that the presence of the French troops in the Sahel region is quite divisive amongst the citizens of that area. There's also the 12,000-strong MINUSMA force, which is a UN force operating in the region. Are all of them coordinating their operations properly, do you think?
Well, I think MINUSMA are primarily they're looking at trying to ensure peace, advancements on the peace process in Mali, as well as now they're focusing on the center. But in the end of the day, both Barkhane and MINUSMA, I would hope, would have a positive effect on the behavior of the security forces in both of those countries to seek to deter some of these abuses, which we believe are driving young men into the hands of the armed Islamist groups.
And do you see, finally, and very briefly, if you would, Corinne, do you see any determination from the leaders of these countries to actually look for ways to better the lives of their people in such a way that they can curb these attacks?
Well, there have been some gains, especially in Mali. I think they're making gains in that. But again, what underscores the insecurity, which has gone on for years in this region, is corruption, bad governance, negligence, lack of services, and again, security force abuses. So those are the big picture issues that simply have to be addressed, or else the military solution will fail to meet its goals.
Corinne Defka there from Human Rights Watch. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, former Nigerian captain Rita Chikwelu is on the move after a decade in Sweden. I'm Peter Okwoche. The top story this hour. Turkey has warned that it will teach a lesson to Libyan warlord Khalifa Haftar if he resumes an offensive on the UN-backed government in Tripoli. Now, since heavy rains hit Somalia in November, 250,000 people have been forced from their homes. The city of Beledweyne, north of the capital Mogadishu, has been practically underwater since then. The BBC's Bella Shegu traveled to a makeshift camp in the area to see how residents are coping.
In November, families across parts of Somalia lost everything. When floodwaters hit the city of Beledweyne, men, women and children were forced out of their homes. Now they live here.
At this IDP camp, hundreds of families are waiting for help. They have lost everything, following a flood waters that submerged the entire town in early November.
We have been forced to flee our homes because of the water, but thanks to God, we are still alive. We welcome anyone who is willing to help. We received some help, but it's not enough.
We live in small tents. We can't go back to our town as there is no clean water, and we still fear another episode of floods may submerge the town again.
The United Nations say more than 2 million people have been displaced in Somalia due to floods, droughts and internal conflicts. The floods destroyed 3/4 of the city and many surrounding villages. Roads are closed and the airport is still cut off. Local authorities say this latest flood is the worst to hit the area. They insist that longer-term infrastructure solutions are urgently needed.
It would be better to spend money preventing disasters like this, rather than the hundreds of millions it costs to deal with them afterwards.
Families don't know if they will ever be able to return home. or when things will start to improve. Bella Shego, BBC News, Plateau.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi, what have you got for us today?
Some developments in Ghanaian football. The Ghana Football Association has been naming over the past couple of hours coaches at all levels of the game in the country. Mercy Tego has been reappointed coach of the senior women's national team, where Sike Akonor is expected to be announced as the coach of the Black Stars. Ghanaian sports journalist Michael Oti-Adje with more on the story.
So it's been a day of major announcements relating to the various national teams from the new Ghana Football Association. Former Black Queens coach Mercy Tego, also a former FIFA referee, is back in her seat as coach of the senior women's team in Ghana. There have been a number of appointments to junior women's team as well as junior male national teams. The big appointment expected later is that Sike Akonor, Charles Kwabena Akonor, former Black Stars captain, former Wolfsburg captain, will replace Kwesi Appiah as the new Black Stars coach. He's expected to be assisted by the former Aston Villa Middlesbrough midfielder George Boateng, who, despite committing his international future to the Netherlands, retains a strong connection to Ghana, the country of his birth. That is expected to come later. Charles Akonor, new Ghana coach, but announcements already made. Mercy Tego is the new national women's team coach in Ghana.
All right, and let's stay in Ghana into a story that we've been following. The Ghana Football Association has temporarily banned Asante Kotoko from playing games at the Baba Yara Sports Stadium in Kumasi over safety concerns. It follows a violent incident that marred the Ghana Premier League match between the Kumasi-based team Asante Kotoko and Berkham Chelsea on Sunday. Let's move on to the English Premier League, where Manchester United manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer says that Ivory Coast international Eric Bailly could be included in the United squad for their weekend trip against table toppers Liverpool. The 25-year-old defender picked up an injury last summer in a pre-season friendly against Spurs and hasn't featured for a first-team match in 6 months, but all that could change. He did feature, though, for the under-23s against Newcastle on Friday and is expected to play again for the reserves today, but hopefully this time for 90 minutes.
It's very close. He might be back for the weekend. We've got a game arranged today with the reserves, so he'll play that one. Hopefully get 90 minutes because he didn't feel any after effects of the game on Friday, so he might be ready for Liverpool.
And former Liverpool and Juventus midfielder Momo Sissoko has announced his retirement from football. The ex-Mali international, who turns 35 later this month, last played in the French second tier for Sochaux last season. And elsewhere, South Africa women's captain Janine van Wyk has been forced to end her deal with Danish club Fortuna Hjørring due to injury. The 32-year-old has struggled to recover from a knee injury. She picked up helping South Africa win the regional COSAFA Cup just before signing the deal. That's all the sport, Peter.
Many thanks, Mimi. Thank you very much. Now, he lost his sight after suffering measles when he was a child, but that hasn't held back 37-year-old Emeka Abugu, who says he's become the most reliable mechanic in his community in Enugu, Ezike in Nigeria. He told us how he learned his trade.
My name is Emeka Abugu. I'm a blind mechanic. My dad had a little spanner he used to repair bicycles. Sometimes I'll pick up a spanner and try to fix the bicycles myself. Little by little, with God's help, I started perfecting the skills. That's how I started fixing things. When I became blind, there were no preventive drugs for measles where I lived. We had only just started hearing about measles. Everyone should try and vaccinate their kids so they don't find themselves in my situation. My greatest achievement is the family that God gave me. If God provides enough money for me, I would love to send my kids to school and finish my house.
It's absolutely brilliant. Now, don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team. I'm on social media at Okwoche. But for now, from me, Peter Okwoche, and the rest of the Focus on Africa team, thanks for watching. Goodbye.